guys, so this is our reading comp for Thursday, April 13th. So I wanted to kind of do it with you guys a few more times before I leave you on your own, okay? So pause the video and get your reading comp number 4. Y'all remember, it's the sheet of paper that looks like this, okay? All right, so put your name on the front of your reading comp and then turn it over to the back side. Before we read, we are going to read our questions and see what we're going to be looking for in our reading, okay? So our first question says, when did architects begin building the Leaning Tower of Pisa? Number 2, how many floors had been built when the tower started to lean? We need to try to find the answer to what did the early architects do to try to correct the lean? And then we need to figure out how many total floors does the tower have? Why does the Tower of Pisa lean? Surely in this reading it'll tell us that. What was done to the bells of the tower in the 1950s? By 1990, what were tourists no longer allowed to do? What did the engineers add to temporarily keep the tower from collapsing? And number 9, what was John Berlin's idea to save the tower? And number 10, engineers were able to straighten the tower by how many inches? So let's turn it back over to the front side. I'm going to read and you follow along. Have your highlighters out. I didn't tell you to grab that already, so you can pause the video and grab your highlighter. Okay, so we're ready to read. So follow along as I'm reading and we're going to highlight answers as we come to them. In 1173, architects began building a bell tower in the town of Italy. So what year? Right there's the answer to that question. In 1173, highlight it. After constructing the first 3 floors, architects noticed a problem. The Tower of Pisa was beginning to lean. So I think one of the questions was, when did they detect the problem, or when did the tower begin to lean, I think was the question. Well, after constructing the first 3 floors, highlight that. And then what was the problem? I think that was the question. The tower began to lean, highlight that. Hoping to correct the lean to the north, the architects built the last 5 floors to tilt to the south. So what did the architects decide to do to try and fix it? That was the question. So highlight, they built the last 5 floors to tilt to the south. And then one of the questions said, how many floors were there in all? So it talked about the tower leaning after they got done with the 3rd floor, or 3 floors, remember? And then it says after completing the last 5 floors, they talked about that. So 3 plus 5 is 8. So I'm thinking our answer there would be 8. You might want to just write that in the highlighter on the side. Okay, and then built on shifting soil of sand and clay, the tower leaned more and more each year, and each time someone tried to straighten the tower, it only made the problem worse. So what was the cause? I think that was one of our questions. What was the cause of the tower leaning? Highlight. It was built on shifting soil of sand and clay. Finally, in the 1950s, the bells of the great tower were silenced to keep the tower from collapsing. So I think there was a question, what happened to the bells in the 1950s? Highlight, they were silenced. By 1990, tourists were no longer allowed to climb the steps of the tower. One of the questions was, what could tourists no longer do in 1990? Well, you need to highlight, they could no longer climb the steps of the tower. Afraid of losing the tower in 1995, engineers added steel cables and weighted the north side of the tower with over 800 tons of lead. So I'm pretty sure that one of the questions were, what did the engineers add to temporarily keep the tower from collapsing? So you need to highlight there that the engineers added steel cables and weighted the north side of the tower with over 800 tons of lead. But the men knew this was only a temporary answer. Something had to be done before the Leaning Tower of Pisa collapsed. In 1998, engineer John Berland came to the rescue with an idea that had worked on other towns with leaning problems. Over 9 years, more than 70 tons of soil were taken from underneath the north side of the tower. Wow, so you need to know what John Berland's idea was, and that was to take 70 tons of soil from underneath the north side of the tower. Highlight that. Slowly, the tower straightened 18 inches to the position it was at in 1838. So I think one of the questions asked, how many inches did the tower straighten up? It says it straightened up 18 inches, so you need to highlight that. Engineers say that's enough. They are content to save the tower without straightening it completely. After all, the Leaning Tower of Pisa has to lean. All right, so you will go ahead and you will answer your questions on the back side of the paper. If you need to refer back and look at what you highlighted, then definitely do so. And we all should have a pretty good grade on this. Okay, that's it.